Hey friends, my guest this week, Colleen Mitchell, is a process analyst for energy company NACE, as well as a podcast host herself. Living with a chronic disease for most of her life, Colleen helps others live their best life in spite of their illness. If you are someone who is questioning whether management is for you, this is a great episode to hear because Colleen very candidly tells us about her short stint as a manager and how she prefers the individual contributor route moving forward in her career. For those who hate managing people, you'll find comfort in Colleen's words. We have a robust conversation covering many topics from being a female in STEM to unemployment to positive management techniques and much more. We may have even talked a little bit about our love for Harry Potter. If you're looking for links to the resources mentioned in this episode, you can head over to ridethetidecollective.com/podcast to find the episode blog, and I'll also link it into the show notes. As always, if you want to connect with me or need inspirational and educational career management and advancement content, you can follow Ride the Tide Collective on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. I am also on Clubhouse now at Ride the Tide COL. If you're loving these interview episodes, please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. And if you didn't know, I also have the video version of this interview up on my YouTube channel, which you can also subscribe to. Just search Ride the Tide Collective. As always, I appreciate your support. Welcome, everyone. My guest today is very exciting for a couple of reasons. One is I have already been a guest on her podcast, and we'll talk about what that podcast is and why I was a guest on it. But also, she is a mechanical engineer. She has a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Washington State University. She has been a research associate and is currently a process analyst at the NACE Corporation. And that's an energy corporation, an energy company. And I'm going to let her explain what they do and what that is, because I know I don't really know all the ins and outs of companies like that, and all energy companies do different things. So I'm going to let her explain what that is. But one of the reasons that I brought her on, aside from the fact that we both have a love for podcasting and we have our own podcast, but is that she is a female in a male-dominated world. And world, industry, all the same at this point. But that was one of the things that drew me to her to have her on as a guest for my podcast, because I wanted her to talk about that. So Colleen, thank you so much for being on my podcast and being a guest today.
Thank you for having me on. And it's so funny you say female in a male-dominated field, because my company operates and maintains power plants. And I think our very first female plant manager was hired in October.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm so excited, but at the same time, like, oh,
right.
You wish these things progressed quicker than they did, but I still think it's great that we're starting to see women really come into industries that they have not been in before for a variety of reasons. And so kudos to your company for really paving the way for that. I think that's going to be wonderful for other females who are interested in that type of work.
Yeah. So NACE Corporation is a third-party operations maintenance provider for power plants. So what happens usually with the power industry is that companies will own power plants, or banks will own power plants, and then banks don't know what to do with power plants. They just own them. And so they'll come to third-party providers like us and say, hey, we want you to operate our power plant. So it basically becomes my company's power plant for all intents and purposes, except we don't own it. So we just operate and maintain them. Like, all of the employees are ours, all of all of that is under our umbrella, but we don't own it. So it's kind of an interesting situation.
Wow. Okay. I definitely just learned something. I didn't even know that it could work that way. I just assumed you're an energy company and you own the plant that you run. That
Yep.
is so interesting. Oh, wow. Thank you for clarifying that and sharing, because I know I will not be the only one that didn't know that.
And sometimes utilities will hire third-party operators. Sometimes like companies who own multiple power plants, they might have different third-party providers operate different pieces of their portfolios. And so it's just kind of an interesting mix of different companies involved in running a power plant. And sometimes power plants can have multiple owners. That's fun.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. I feel like this could be a completely other episode, just talking about power plants now. And because I know that I can go off on tangents, I'm gonna keep us moving forward because I'm very interested in this. Okay, so tell me about your role in this organization. What do you do?
So my role is process analyst, and that's like a whole interesting conversation because this role didn't exist until I came to the company. But I work for our operations and maintenance operation, or it's basically our O&M services division inside our corporate headquarters. So I'm on the corporate side. I'm not on the plant side. But I basically support our general manager of O&M services, which means I support our engineering, our maintenance, our environmental, and our operations teams. So I'm kind of this high level horizontal resource between all of these teams to kind of help everything running, help keep everything running on those teams, keep everyone coordinated. That's like the major support role piece. I'm also our Smartsheet admin. So Smartsheet is a cloud collaborative, basically Excel online kind of platform. It's a lot more powerful than Excel online, at least. And if you're watching the video version of this, I'm wearing the Smartsheet sweatshirt because I'm an early adopter and totally go to the conferences. They don't have these sweatshirts anymore, and I'm really sad. It's like 3 years old.
Oh
Wear it every day.
I've actually used Smartsheet. I used Smartsheet in my last like full-time professional role, and I learned how to master that sucker, man.
I love it. I love it so much. I came into the company and didn't know a thing about it. My manager basically gave this program to me and then dropped me into their very first annual conference. Nice. So I learned Smartsheet at the conference, at their inaugural conference. It was awesome.
Oh my!
And then after that, I was like, I have to be an admin. And then it took me like 3 years to be an admin, but now I'm an admin and nice. I love it. It's so much fun. So that's one other piece of what I do. And then another thing is that our company we have trademarked something called Smart O&M. So it's basically getting the O&M services kind of onto a more smart level. So we do things in preventative ways. We want to make sure we have things digitized so we can see real-time things. Might involve remote start capabilities. But part of that is data analysis. And we have a big fleet. And so with all of this data, we have to analyze it in some way. So I'm involved with the data analysis and like building the business analytic tools. So I'm on those teams to help basically surface that information to our operations directors, our high level executives, to make sure that they're seeing what's coming out of those plants from the data perspective.
Right.
And then it's so funny because my role is a lot of things. I'm also on our leadership academy. So we have an internal leadership academy that runs like monthly webinars on leadership topics. We do small classes with members from our plants for like manager journeys and like teaching people how to be like first-time managers. It's just, so I'm involved with all of that and I love it, which is funny because I've never been a manager myself. Well, I have been, we can get to that later, but I didn't like it. So I'd love like the leadership topics. And I've talked at several of our internal conferences this past year. And that's also opened up so many new opportunities within the company. And it's just kind of exploded in the past year. But that kind of in a nutshell is what I do for NACE.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so first of all, I have to commend the company again because leadership programs, management programs, this is one of my pet peeves about corporate America, industry. I mean, most companies don't have formalized programs, don't have this type of education. So I think that's amazing to help your people really learn how to be a manager if that's the path that they end up going down. So, I love hearing that. That's so amazing. Okay. I have a side question. Okay. How does your degree, because you have a mechanical engineering degree, that is very specific, very difficult degree. So how does that play in to the work that you do now, or does it?
Mechanical engineering is actually the general practitioner of engineering. So it's kind of actually the easiest one to get. Actually, no, civil is the easiest one to get, but we'll just, ignore civil.
People can fight about that in the comments.
Yeah, you can fight about civil engineering in the comments. Mechanical engineering is really the general practitioner of engineers. And I went into engineering because I thought that I could get a job doing what Tony Stark did.
Nice.
Not going to lie, Iron Man put me on the engineering path. But then when I realized that I couldn't actually do all of the stuff that Iron Man can do, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I don't actually like this as much. And when I first applied for this company, the mechanical engineering degree was one of the job requirements. And it turns out that I don't actually do any engineering, but I work with a lot of engineers. And it is so helpful to understand what is going on in their heads.
Yes. Oh, that's
because it's also what goes on in my head.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. I'm so interested in, what people majored in and then how they got to where they are and what the connections are. So I appreciate you explaining that. That's really helpful. And that happens a lot where you might have a degree or experience in one thing and it helps you understand a certain group of people in a better way. And even if you don't do that thing yourself. And I think that's a really great skill to have.
Side note, I'm also a writer, and I've heard that if you can write and you're an engineer, you are a unicorn. And so I do a lot of technical editing for my group.
Wow. Is that because of like the creative side of
I
writing?
think so. I've noticed that a lot of engineers tend to have run-on sentences. They tend to put a lot of detail in there when you don't need a lot of detail. And so being able to have that eyeball for it, because I'm also a writer, it's really helpful to pare down reports or to just make sure that a topic is clear. Like put things in layman's terms, because when you're writing for an audience that isn't engineers, but you're an engineer and you need them to like get across this engineering idea, then you need to be able to articulate it well. And I've found that most engineers can't actually do that. So you need to have some kind of writer on the team, or have an engineer who also writes, which, like I just said, is kind of a unicorn.
That's awesome. Oh, I love hearing that. That's so great. Okay. So I want to talk about your career path. We've talked a little bit about what you're doing right now, but can you tell me about a couple of poignant transitions that you've had that got you to this place?
So I have actually had a relatively short career, all things considered. This is only the second job or second company I've ever worked for. I graduated in 2014, at the end of 2014, and I worked for 2 years at one of the national laboratories in the United States. So I worked there for 2 years. And then at the end of that experience, they didn't have anything else for me because it was a 2-year contract. They couldn't extend it, whatever reasons. And so I spent 6 months unemployed. And that was a huge mental health deal. But
I can imagine.
Right? We lived with my in-laws, which it was great that they gave that to us. But at the end of it, I was like really happy to get an apartment.
Yep.
So 6 months unemployed. And during that time, I found the position that I applied for at NACE Corporation. And when I started, it was a really, really brand new position. It had just been created. They didn't have like any job history to go from. It was just basically brand new. So everything they put in the job description was just a guess of what they wanted the person who filled it to do. And I was like, I can do that. So like the whole time I've been at this company, I have basically defined my job role with of course input from my manager. And at the beginning of like in I think end of March, early April of 2018, so 3 years ago now, there was a major reorganization that my manager protected me from.
Wow.
I was 6 or 7 months into the role, and he basically fought to keep me. And he didn't just fight to keep me for his team. He fought to keep me working for him specifically. And so that was a really like powerful example of what it means to have a good manager.
I love hearing these stories because you always hear the bad stories. I feel like that's what we're exposed to so much is the negative management. I mean, I talk about it, you know, in my social media and my content a lot. But the reality is there are good managers out there. And when you prove yourself to a manager and they're a good manager, they'll go to bat for you. They will be there and they will protect you. So I love that you shared that. I think that's really helpful for people who maybe have had a lot of bad experiences and don't think it exists. Or it validates the people that do have a good experience and think maybe this doesn't exist in other places.
Yeah,
it does.
People don't leave bad companies, they leave bad managers.
Absolutely.
And there are so many bad managers out there. So I'm like really glad that I hit the jackpot with my manager. That's honestly. And he knows this. I've told him. He is well aware.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Any other transitions or things that you want to talk about with your career path?
That is basically how I got to this point. Honestly.
Awesome. No, that's okay. That's okay. And I do want to say, because right now, I mean, we're still in the middle of the pandemic. A lot of people have been laid off. And I think one thing that we need to start normalizing, and I hope that between 2008, 2009, and now with this pandemic, we can start normalizing that it's okay to be unemployed for a period of time. It's okay to, you know, if you need to leave a position for mental health reasons, if you just any of that, I feel like it's okay to talk about now in a way that it wasn't maybe 20 or 30 years ago. It was like you never wanted to say that you were unemployed. And now on LinkedIn, you know, people are like, I just got let go from my job, or there was, you know, they downsized and can you help me? And that's becoming a lot more common. And I love seeing that because it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the person. It doesn't mean that they did anything wrong, but things happen and you know, contracts run out and organizations restructure and organizations downsize and pandemics happen. And sometimes you just, you know, you end up on unemployment. And I don't think we need to find shame in that anymore, the way that I think we used to many years ago. So thank you for sharing that.
And the perspective changes. I mean, my dad was with Boeing for 35 years. He had opportunities to take jobs at other companies, but he didn't because Boeing gave him a really good, like, overall package deal. And if the thing is between job hopping or spending 20 years at a company, then you're going to lose either way. Because if somebody might not want to spend 20 years at a company and somebody might not want to spend 1 year at a company. So you can't just make a flat rule that it's one or the other. There has to be a mix of both.
Right.
And neither of them is wrong.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing now with the career journey. There is no right way. There is no, okay, in this specific career, this is the path that you have to take. And if you don't take this path, then you're not going to make it. That means nothing anymore. And
unless you're a doctor and you have to do residency.
Well, yeah. Okay. There are some, but even doctors, you know, they have more flexibility once they're done with their schooling. They have a lot of flexibility of the type of work that they want to do, where they want to practice, how they want to practice. You know, my cousin's a doctor and she went from working at a hospital to owning her own practice with 3 of her doctor buddies, you know? And she didn't have to do that, but that was something that they wanted to do. And so I think there are so many options available in all different types of career paths. And if you've only been exposed to, you know, a narrow view of what that looks like, then sometimes you can't think beyond what, you know, you've been exposed to. And that's why, I mean, honestly, that's part of why I'm doing this podcast and having people come on and talk about their career path, because I want people to see, oh, I do something similar, but I didn't know that I could do that. Or I didn't know that this path could lead to this path. And so, yeah, so I appreciate you talking about that. And I think the older generations, like the boomers, mostly the boomers, they really had that. They stayed with a company their entire career, but companies were built in such a way at that time to support people doing that. And they're not built that way anymore. Some of them are, but it really just depends on the path that you're on within that company. And, if you want to do that, great. If you don't, like you said, that's okay too. You just have to honor what you want in your life. I want to talk about advice for people. So what are a few pieces of advice that you would give to people who are trying to advance their career? I think specifically in the area that you're in, like if you were mentoring like a young woman in the engineering program in college right now, like what advice would you give them to get into the field? Hey friends, Julia here. I wanted to take a break in the interview to share about a new resource you're going to want to sign up for. Career management and advancement is often one of the most overlooked areas of our life when it comes to personal growth and investment, even though we spend about a third or more of our day working in said career. Now is the time to start investing in yourself and your career, and the Career Hack Masterclass is the best first step. This 5-part video masterclass with subtitles takes you through some of my process along with some of my best actionable tips to start advancing your career now. Normally, a masterclass like this would be a $200 to $300 investment, but I am giving it away for free because I want to see you start to take control of your career. Head over to controlyourcareernow.com/careerhackmasterclass to sign up and start investing in your career today. For those who do sign up, there is a special offer that you'll want to take advantage of, which is also free. Hint, it might include a session with me. Again, head over to controlyourcareernow.com/careerhackmasterclass to sign up today. I'll leave the link in the show notes and blog post for this episode. Now let's get back to the interview.
Never stop learning. You are going to be learning so much going forward. Like when I was in college, I was taught stuff on programs that I don't use. And if you're going to get ahead or like advance in careers, be open to learning new programs, be open to learning new pieces of technology, because it's like it or not, it's going into a more digital version of it. And the easier you are with learning new technology and embracing new technology, the easier it's going to be for you. Another option is to consider lateral moves within the company to get experience in different departments. And this, at least in the power industry, can also go between corporate and the plants. So we tend to bring up a lot of new managers from the plants into corporate. Once they make it to that level of seniority and we have an opening, we'll tend to get people from the plants. And we've even had people go from corporate to the plants. So it can go both ways. If you want to get experience in either of them, then you have that opportunity to apply to different areas inside the company. Another good idea is to talk to your manager about what kind of track you want to be on. And when I say track, you could be a manager or you can be a subject matter expert. And I knew this ahead of time going into it that I didn't want to be a manager, but I was assigned an intern. And that experience confirmed that I don't want to be a manager. I want to be a subject matter expert.
Okay, so tell me more about that, because so one of my big things with people is it's okay to not want to be a manager. But the self-awareness with that, I think, is really important, because I think a lot of people think, oh, in order to find success, you have to manage people, because in a lot of corporations, that is the way to move up. So explain a little bit more about how you got there and what that looks like for you.
Oh, so It was really so my division was basically kind of told that we were going to have an intern, and we're like, okay, cool. And my manager doesn't have time to deal with an intern, and none of the rest of the managers in my department have time to handle interns. And so I got the intern, and and this intern was super sweet, and he helped us. He actually really helped us build some of the stuff that I still use today for all the data analysis stuff. So that really helped us. But I was a trash manager. I will fully admit that I did not like build a really good relationship with him. I didn't go ask him questions. I didn't make sure that he was doing the work he was supposed to be doing. I wasn't checking his work. I was an awful manager, and I take full responsibility for that because I didn't know what the heck I was doing.
You don't know what you don't know,
you don't know what you don't know. But I did know that I didn't like it. And that I knew that going into it. And that probably colored how I acted towards him. And that probably had some kind of influence on it because I went in like thinking I don't like being a manager already. So why would I want to try being a good manager? But I think if I had approached it more as I'm his mentor and I want to help him succeed from that perspective, but I'm not responsible for his results, then that would have been a better fit, because then I'm not actually managing him as he's reporting to me on his progress or stuff like that. So that's just, if you are assigned an intern, be kind to them and be kind to yourself. Pay attention to them. Oh my
gosh. Thank you for being vulnerable about that, because I don't know how many people would actually admit that they were a trash manager. But
I don't want to be one, so I can admit that I was a trash one.
Okay, so this actually leads into one of my other questions, which, what management advice do you have? And I'm going to ask it from a different perspective, from you being managed by somebody else. Like, what do you think, especially if you want to go that subject matter expert route? Like, what do you want in a manager? What tips do you have for managers to help them adapt and manage better?
Well, it's a good thing I have a great manager to use as an example.
Yes.
And it's also funny because I am involved with all of the Leadership Academy stuff. And I'm just, I like this. I like the intellectual side of it. I don't like being in it. But probably the first and most important tip is to foster psychological safety. So this is the idea that nobody is going to be punished or ridiculed or judged for speaking up. And not having psychological safety means that people are going to risk their physical safety to avoid a negative emotion. And what I mean by that is, in the power plant industry, safety is a huge, 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 huge deal. We measure our safety statistics, and if it's underneath a 1.0, that means we are really good. And the industry average is like 1.5 or something. And this past year we had our lowest ever, like lowest ever safety like incident rate. And that's insane. We already had the lowest in the industry, and now it's even lower. Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of that has to do with psychological safety and feeling safe enough to speak up when you see something unsafe going on. It is really easy to say, hey, stop that, if it's a contractor on the site, because you don't have a personal relationship with them. But if it's your coworker and you see them doing something wrong, it's a lot harder to speak up, because you might think they're going to judge you, or you might get in trouble. But if you're fostering a psychologically safe environment, then you're not going to have that problem where people are afraid to speak up when something is going wrong. So that's the first idea, is to have a psychologically safe culture, not just on your team, but in your company, because that is such a big deal. And that goes right along with developing a good relationship with your employees. Like, I don't care if you don't like them, like as a person or whatever. If you're going to have a successful, like whatever, if you're going to have a successful team, you have to have good relationships with your employees. That's just a no-brainer. And the better relationships you have with your employees, the better you're going to perform. Like, just overall, your company is going to be better if you have good relationships with your employees. And that just goes together with psychological safety. And then the last piece is emotional intelligence. Julia's like leaning in, give me more.
Yes, please talk about emotional intelligence.
You have to learn how to manage your own emotions and be aware of what's going on in your head before you talk to somebody. You don't do anybody any favors by micromanaging or letting anger or other emotions get in the way or rule how you manage. It just doesn't work, because people will feel awful if they're being micromanaged. They will feel awful if like a manager walks into a room and is angry about something, but you don't know what that is. They could be angry at you, but you just don't know, because that manager hasn't taken control of his emotions and developed his own emotional intelligence to know how to keep his emotions in check. So those are the three big pieces for managers.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. I love the tangible, practical, researched based information, because it makes such a difference. And
this is the kind of stuff I present on inside my company.
And you're cracking me up, because you're like, I refuse to manage other people, but I will teach other people how to manage people. I think that's a good idea.
Because it's the intellectual part of it. I'm really good at understanding the intellectual part of it. But if you drop me in a situation now, I would be a lot better. Honestly, if somebody gave me an intern now, I would be a lot better.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean I want to do it.
Well, and again, it comes down to self-awareness, and not everybody is built to manage people, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's the piece that I hope people are hearing. Even as you're giving the tips, I can guarantee there are some people that are like, oh man, that's a lot of stuff to have to think about when you're managing people. And it can be very intimidating if that's just not where you're at, or you think I could do that, but it's going to take me some time to develop some of these skills that I haven't developed. And it's okay to not manage people. That's why they have tracks for people who don't want to manage people, who are subject matter experts. Now it depends on the, industry and the type of organization that you're at, whether or not they have those tracks. So if that's something that you're interested in, then you want to make sure that the places that you're applying to have that for you. And so that's a really great way to, rule out certain companies. But yeah, I love that you're talking about this, because I feel like I talk to more people who love management because of the field that I came out of. But I think we forget that there are people that are like, nope, no, thank you. I just want to do my work and go forward and not have to worry about managing others.
There's always a need for individual contributors. There's always a need for that.
Yeah. And you think about too, the focus that takes, because I've been a manager multiple times and I love it. I love developing people. I'm a coach, that's just part of who I am. But I am very much like you. I'm also an intellectual. I also like getting into my projects, doing work. I like long stretches of work, like multiple hours where I can sit and focus on something. And when you are managing people, you get interrupted a lot. And sometimes that's the boundary that you set as well. But even still, it's hard to go throughout a day without getting interrupted multiple times. So you have to be prepared for that and know that that's what's going to happen when you manage other people. So yeah. Okay. This is my favorite question that I have been asking guests. And it is, tell me about a book that has changed your perspective on your career or life.
There are so many.
I kind of knew you were going to say that, and you can totally give me a list.
Like, you have to make me pick one. So on a personal level, the one that changed my life the most and that I recommend to so many people is Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. Henry Cloud and James Townsend. Boundaries. That's a really, really, really good book. If you have no idea what boundaries are, or if you feel like your boundaries are being stomped on, go buy that book. It's really good. That one came out of a therapy thing, but anyway. So the other one on the kind of the business side is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. So her I love this. Her mission is to. Can we swear on this podcast?
No.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry. You have to use an alternate word.
Okay. So her mission is to create bullcrap free zones where people love their work and love working together. And it's also just saying what you think while also giving a crap about the person you're saying it to. That's radical candor. So too many people are focusing on one side of that and not the other. So like maybe they care too much and so they don't want to discipline their employee, but then they end up being a weak leader like that. And then there's the opposite side where you're micromanaging and you're being too strict. And so then you end up not caring about the person and you start treating them like a number instead. And so radical candor is the balance of both.
I love that. Both of those books. So good. Okay. Do you have more? You can share more if you want
Harry
to.
Potter. Harry Potter
I knew
changed
you
my
were
life.
going to say that after I read your bio.
I mean, I identify as a Ravenclaw, so obviously Harry Potter is like my go-to fantasy series.
But why?
So I love books. I love reading. I love all of the learning stuff. I think if Hermione was not in Gryffindor, she would have been a Ravenclaw. And actually, it's honestly, if they had mixed houses, I would be a Ravenclaw Slytherin because I'm also really ambitious.
Me too. Me too. I was going to tell. So normally I say Slytherin, and I'm always like, am I though? I don't really know. But I always read stuff, I mean, I've read the books, I've seen the movies, whatever. And I was talking to my husband about it because he's read the books. We're nerds too. It's fine. And he was like, I don't know if you're a Slytherin. And I was like, I think you're underestimating what goes on inside my head, but okay. Like, what do you think? He's like, I think you're Ravenclaw. And I was like, really? And I was reading up more and I was like, oh, okay. I see why you would think that. So now it's like a close tie between the two. So yes.
Also, true Slytherins never go into Slytherin. They're too cunning to go in there. Draco Malfoy was the most Gryffindor Slytherin ever. And like all of my Hogwarts tests put me in Gryffindor. I'm like, no, put me in Ravenclaw.
I always get Slytherin. I don't know. I'm a good person. I promise.
That's not to say Slytherins are bad people.
No, I just feel like they get
a bad rap.
They get a bad rap. Yeah, they get typecast pretty bad.
I mean, that's because we have people like Draco Malfoy and Lucius muddying the waters.
I know, but yeah, okay. We cannot turn this into a Harry Potter podcast.
Man. Talk forever about Harry Potter.
Oh my gosh. Okay, now you're making me want to go back and read the books and watch the movies. I used to watch the movies when they were just on TV. I would just have them on. And we don't have cable anymore, so I can't do that. My husband was like, how much do you miss Harry Potter right now? And I was like, so much. I used to just have it on and it was so great. And I haven't done that.
ABC Family has Harry Potter basically every weekend.
That's what I used to watch. I mean, that's what I would do. And he's like, seriously, Harry Potter again? I'm like, but I love it. I love it. And I was a late adopter too. Like he read it early, like as the books were coming out. And I started reading it right as the last one came out because I was like, this is dumb. I don't want to watch this. I thought the whole thing was dumb. And then I watched the first one, read the books, and then watched the rest of the movies, and I was hooked. And I
literally grew up on Harry Potter. My godmother read me the first book.
That was yeah. So my husband's sister, she grew up with the books and everything. So yeah. Oh, that's so funny. Okay. We can't keep talking about Harry Potter. We can, but we'll go on forever. Okay. Any other books that you want to add?
Those are the big ones that come to mind immediately. Awesome. There's plenty more leadership books that I read every year.
Nice. Okay, good. Okay. I know we've talked about different points in your career, but I love to ask this question because part of the tenet of what I do is controlling your career. So can you tell me about a time where you felt like you took control of your career?
So I have had a historic hatred for public speaking, which if you've met me since the end of 2019, you'd be like, what? Because I have a podcast and speak in my company. But the turning point was really getting fed up with that hatred and wanting to do something about it. So in the middle of 2019, I was driving home from work. It's a 12-minute drive, so it's pretty short. And I just made the decision that I was going to present at our next big company conference, which was happening in February of 2020. And as soon as I made that decision, I told the person who was running the conference, I told my boss, and basically I had to start learning how to give a speech. So I joined Toastmasters, and yeah, I love Toastmasters.
They're amazing. So amazing.
So I joined Toastmasters and I put 50 hours of rehearsal, practice, writing, memorizing into this speech. And I gave that speech in February of 2020 without ever thinking about what the reaction would be. And it turned out that people think that I'm a natural speaker. So that first speech basically ended up, I gave that exact same, well, not the exact same speech. I gave that speech again 3 weeks later at a conference that I had not planned on going to, because the conference organizers at the first one basically called the organizers at the second one and said, you have to have Colleen speak at the conference. And so then I'm like, okay, now you guys are hyping me up and all that. And so I spoke at 2 conferences in the first month. They were both in February of 2020. And then right after we got back from that, everything shut down.
Wow.
But I had a goal to, at least in the next couple of years, to present at 5 different internal company conferences. And as of tomorrow, we're recording this on February 24th, 2021. As of tomorrow, I will have spoken at my 5th conference inside our company.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. So for everybody listening, Colleen is basically the poster child for what control your career means. And I love talking to professionals like you, because what you just described is what has to happen in your career. You have something that you need or want to do, and you decide, whether you're deathly afraid or not, you just decide, okay, I'm going to do this. Then you find the resource that's going to help you do the thing that you want to do, and then you go and do it. Like, that's skill building. That is advancing your career. That's taking control of your career so that you can go and do the things that you want to do. Because now people are going to know you, and that's going to expand your professional presence, because you one day in your car decided, you know what, I'm sick of this and I'm going to make a change. And I respect that so much. Thank you.
And that whole decision process also happened around the same time that I joined Self-Coaching Scholars, which is a monthly coaching program by the Life Coach School. So that combined with Toastmasters and just working on my brain, it's changed me so much over the last year that I don't even know like who I am compared to who I was then. And that all led to the decision to get a life coaching certification. So I'm currently in certification right now to get my life coaching certification. And the things that I'm learning in that, combined with the things that I learned in Scholars, combined with the things that I learned on the free podcast, all of this is like helping me add value to my company. It's not just helping me add value to my own life, because a lot of what I did in the presentations is material that I learned in Scholars, or material that I learned from just like being coached myself.
Yes.
And now I'm sharing this with my company, and they get to benefit from that too.
Yes. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, I love hearing that. That's so great. Okay, we're going to talk about all your side hustle things in a minute. But I have a couple more questions that I want to get at. And these were late additions. Well, one wasn't, but these were late additions. Okay. So I was on your podcast, and you have a podcast about diabetes. You have type 1 diabetes. I do not have type 1 diabetes, but I had gestational diabetes. So for anybody who follows me, you know that I've done podcasts on it. I've written articles, things like that. So I was a guest on your podcast to talk about what it's like to have gestational diabetes, especially when you do not have diabetes and you have no idea what the heck is going on. So one of the things that I would like you to share, because I am sure I have listeners out there who have diabetes or some other type of chronic illness, right? How has having type 1 impacted your career, and what would you want somebody to know who doesn't have a chronic illness, like in how to manage or like work with people who do and who decide to disclose it?
Okay, I'll answer the second question first because it has to do with asking questions and being okay with the person you're asking not answering. Because a lot of type 1 diabetics don't want to share that they have type 1 diabetes, and that is their decision to make. I just think that people who have type 1 should share because it's important for safety reasons. But if somebody has a condition and they don't share it with you, you could ask, depending on employment laws and all of that. But if they don't answer, don't take it personally. It's just their thing to deal with.
Yeah.
Type 1 diabetes it's not the same as the diabetes that you hear about on the radio. I think it's 30 million people have type 2 diabetes, that's the one you hear about on the radio that you can reverse and all that. Type 1 is not curable. Type 1 is for life. Once you have it, can't get rid of it. And 1.25 million Americans have type 1. So it's estimated by 2050 that 5 million will have it. And it's an explosion in terms of people being diagnosed with it. And half of those diagnosed with type 1 now are adults. So just because you're not a kid doesn't mean you won't get type 1. So that's something to be very aware of. I have never used diabetes as a reason not to do something. Unless it was gym class in high school, I used that as a reason to not do gym class a lot. That was totally different. But in my professional career, I've never used it as a reason not to do something. I think that having diabetes has given me a much better perspective about safety. Because like I mentioned earlier, safety is a huge deal in the power industry. Because if I walk onto a power plant or into a power plant area, I need to know what my blood sugar is. I need the people who are also on the site to know that I have type 1 diabetes. And if you find me lying unconscious on the gravel, this is what you do. So they need to know that I have it. I need to basically tell them what it is, how well controlled I am. And I'm very well controlled. So they likely wouldn't have to do anything about it. But in case it did, then they need to know that. So in terms of like my power industry thing, it's not a big deal because I work corporate. I don't actually go to the plants that often. Mm-hmm. But when I do, that's when I make that pitch that like I have type 1 diabetes. This is what you need to know. And sometimes I've even come across people at the plants who have like type 2 diabetes, or they're wearing a CGM and I'm like, hey, that's awesome. And so then I get to connect with them more about that. But for my coaching, I specialize in coaching diabetics and other people with chronic illness. So in that terms, it's been like a really big impact because I literally coach people with diabetes.
Nice. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I think it's important for people to know, and I am in no way advocating that you have to share any kind of chronic illness, but having been someone who worked with somebody who had a chronic illness that impacted their day-to-day work, it was very difficult for us on the other side to understand what was going on because that person decided not to share. And that's why I wanted to get your perspective on that, because what ended up happening in our environment, which was already toxic to begin with, but what ended up happening was there was a lot of resentment and a lot of frustration with people who reported to this person because they weren't around, they weren't answering questions, they were calling out unexpectedly when we would have big things happening where they needed to be there. All these things were going on and we're sitting here like, what is happening? And I remember when I found out what happened, like what it was, my level of empathy, like that shifted. And again, I'm not advocating for somebody to share if they're not comfortable. But in this particular instance, it impacted this person's work, which impacted our view of them, which made it very hard for us to do our jobs. But once I understood, I was like, oh, okay, now I can approach this situation in a different way. And I can approach my working relationship with this person in a different way. And my expectations shifted.
Yeah, again, context matters.
Yeah, my empathy changed, and so anyway, I really appreciate you sharing that because I think it's helpful for people to understand from the other side, what it's like and the precautions that you might take and all of that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I've never hidden my diabetes. Like I used to work for a moving company and like internship, a summer job. And I actually had one of the other people ask if I came with an instruction manual. Like I don't come with an instruction manual, but here's what you need to know. But like everybody, so when I worked out of my office, because I'm working from home right now, I bring Smarty rolls to meetings. Like people understand when I pull my pump out and do stuff with my insulin pump, because I've told them, everybody knows it's not a surprise.
Right.
Like I have a cubicle, and on the whiteboard on the cubicle, it's like, I have type 1 diabetes. It's kind of like,
yeah,
it's a conversation starter too. It lets other people who have diabetes in their family, like see that there's somebody else who has it. And then I can be that common resource. And I like that I've done this, because that also has people reaching out within the company when someone in their family is diagnosed, because they know that I have it and I can be a resource to help them.
That's so great.
So telling people that you have it, it's not like a problem.
Yeah.
Unless you make it a problem.
Right. And I think some of that too comes with owning whatever your chronic illness is, and being okay with it. And like my dad had a chronic illness. I have a very good friend that has a chronic illness. And once you start to own it and what you can do and you can articulate that, it changes the atmosphere for everyone versus, being upset or angry or defensive. That's when it's like, okay, let's,
I should mention I've had type 1 for 25 years. So it's not like this is something that I got just a couple years ago and I'm still struggling with. Like this is part of my identity, and it has been since I was a kid.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if anybody out there is type 1 diabetic, you got to connect with Colleen and she'll help you through that if this is new to you. Okay. Another thing I want to talk about, I recently saw a social media post where I think it was on LinkedIn actually, where you were talking about personal finance and how you are really passionate about personal finance. I am also passionate about personal finance. I've had a couple conversations with other guests as well. And I would love to know, like, what is your extent of your passion for personal finance, and what are some tips that you have for people who are interested in it?
Oh my gosh, budget. Please, seriously, budget. Like pay attention to where your money is going. If you don't know where your money is going, you are never going to be able to afford a house. You're not going to be able to afford a car. You won't be able to afford the emergencies that happen. I mean, COVID is such a good example. People didn't have emergency funds. And then they found themselves floundering, not being able to afford their things when they lost their jobs. So seriously, budget. And part of budgeting is building that emergency fund. And then I guess another tip, sign up for all of the alerts that you possibly can for your credit cards, because I got a fraud alert yesterday. So one of our cards was compromised, and they sent a text saying that, or asking, did you spend like $6.11 at this garbled merchant name, whatever? I'm like, no. And so as soon as I texted back no, they closed the card and issued a new one. It's that simple. So I don't have to deal with basically anything else except updating the card number on all of the platforms that I use. So seriously,
Wow.
like sign up for the alerts, make sure that you are knowing what's going on with your finances.
Yes.
I'm in my budget app so often that I would see that charge come through if they had let it and I'd be like, what the hell is this?
Right,
So
right.
like stuff like that doesn't slip past me anyway. But if you're not someone who regularly watches your bank accounts, like you check once a month or something, then signing up for those alerts will really save you.
Yes, yes. Okay, so we just started using QuickBooks not too long ago. Maybe like, I don't know, maybe it's been about a year now. Oh my gosh, was that a game changer? Now I have QuickBooks, I have a business, so all of that is connected together, but we have our personal in there as well. And oh man, I love it so much. I get to run these wonderful reports and it's so easy to see everything and it's the best. And I will say the one thing that my husband and I do now that we did not used to do, we were not good about a couple years ago. We talk weekly. We do like weekly family meetings, even though it's just two of us. And we talk about finances and we pull up QuickBooks and we look at the last week and what we spent. We look at our total month and where we're about to go over or under, what's going on. And I will tell you that has been a game changer for us to really stay in control of our spending and be able to spend, the way that we want to, but have a really good understanding of where everything is going.
Absolutely. I use YNAB. It stands for You Need a Budget. And I've been using that for over
Yes.
4 years. I love it. I love it.
I've heard of that. I never used it, but I've heard of it and I've heard very good things about it. So, and I'll link that into the blog post for this episode so you guys can see the links for all these resources and stuff. So, all right. Okay. What's our last thing here? Oh, yeah. The last thing is to talk about what you're doing. So tell us about the podcast, about the coaching, like all the side hustle things. Where can people contact you? What are all the things?
All the things. Okay. So the podcast is called This is Type 1, Real Life Type 1 Diabetes. And that is on my website, which is inspiredforward.com. And that's also where you can find my coaching services. So I do basically general life coaching, but I specifically focus on people with diabetes, type 1 or type 2, people with chronic illnesses, basically anyone who is using their condition as a reason not to do the things that they want to do in life, because it holds people back. And it kills me when I see people doing that, because this disease does not have to hold you back.
Yes.
So that's the coaching thing. And then I also write novels. So I'm currently working on finishing up edits for my first novel. It's going to go to my editor pretty soon, and I'm shooting for a November publishing date. So hopefully that will happen soon. But I write epic fantasy.
What is that?
So it's like
epic fantasy.
So epic fantasy is basically actually I don't really know how to describe it besides like Harry Potter is epic fantasy, I guess, or like stuff with like dragons and elves. Oh. Lord of the Rings is epic fantasy. There we go.
Oh, okay. All
it's
right.
Like otherworldly, but mine is kind of Earth with epic fantasy, but it's more epic fantasy, at least as the series goes on. But my book in particular, I like describing it as a combination of Chronicles of Narnia, Harry Potter, and King Arthur, just kind of smushed together.
Okay, I think we're going to have to get a copy of that. So
absolutely.
Once that goes live, I'll add it to the blog post too, so people can come back and check it out if that's something that they're interested in. That is so cool. I actually didn't know that about you, so that's really fun.
It's not really linked anywhere on my website, but it will be, because that's going to be basically the hub for everything.
Nice. Colleen, thank you so much for being a guest. This has been such a fun conversation. We have so much in common. I love it.
Thank you for having me on. I've loved talking to you today.
Yes. All right. And like I said, all the resources, everything is going to be linked into the blog post for this episode.